Hi, my name is Steve Petty, and I'd like to take a few minutes to talk to you about the history of the United Methodist Church. The United Methodist Church grew out of the Church of England. It was led by a preacher by the name of John Wesley. John always remained a preacher in the Church of England. He never became a Methodist preacher, but in the sense that there was a Methodist church that he was a part of, but he founded the Methodist Church as we know it and as it is today in America. To think about John Wesley, you need a historical context. Perhaps the best way to think of Wesley is that he lived in almost exactly the time frame as Benjamin Franklin. Most Americans can relate to Benjamin as one of the people who was a founding father in America and one of the preeminent lights and intellects of his time. Certainly, John Wesley, who lived at the same time in England, was all of that for the English church. John was born into a family that was dominated by the mother. Susanna Wesley had 17 kids. Her husband Samuel was also a pastor in the Church of England. They were very, very poor. Sam was often taken away to debtor's prison, often served really, really poor churches. And several times when Sam was in prison, Susanna virtually had to run the church, but she couldn't run the church from the church, so she would often have Bible studies in the kitchen at the rectory. John watched his mother lead the church in this way and watched her lead Bible studies. She also taught all of her children every day. She had different lessons for them. They began to read at a very, very early age, and all were quite bright. But John was the brightest of them all. As a young boy, John was rescued from a terrible fire by a miraculous circumstance, and his mother always felt from that time that John was destined for greatness, and indeed he was. When John was 17, he went off to Oxford College and was influential in starting a group there that was made up of college students who began to read the Bible and take life a little bit more seriously. He was at a college not unlike any other college today, full of college students that like to go drinking and have fun and enjoy being away from the influence of their parents. And Wesley felt that that really wasn't why he went to college. He was there for much more important things. So Wesley, being the serious young man that he was, started this Bible study. And as they read the Bible and as they studied all of the things that the Bible told them and Jesus told them, they felt like it was important to take on a more disciplined lifestyle. So they began to get up a little bit early in the morning to read their Bibles. They began eventually to take on more civic responsibilities. They would go and take food to the prisoners. They would take care of widows and orphans. They were always about town doing different good things for the people of that place. And the rest of the students didn't take kindly to this. They felt that John was just kind of trying to show them up. So they gave this group of young men a terrible name. They called them Methodists. It was a term of derision at the time. They would see them walking across campus and say, "Oh, there goes one of those Methodists, you know about them." But eventually the name stuck and they began to call themselves Methodists. Later on, when John began the Methodist societies, that's the name that he used. Methodist societies really got their start after John had his own religious conversion. Now, he was ordained in the Church of England, and he had a very unhappy and unsuccessful early pastorate in many churches. He went to America, and he had a very unhappy time in America. In fact, he fell in love with a young woman that would not requite his love and failed to serve her communion and had to beat a hasty retreat to England as this was very unpopular in Savannah, Georgia. When he returned to England, feeling somewhat like a failure, he went to a Bible study class led by some Moravians, and there he heard Martin Luther's introduction to the book of Romans. And when he heard that introduction, he felt his heart strangely warmed, and he knew that God loved him in a way he'd never felt before. That personal love of God really changed his life. It was a fire-breathing incident for him. Within just a matter of weeks, John was out in the fields preaching and had to begin what was a very, very successful preaching period in his life. Whereas before, he was unable to preach successfully in great churches, small churches, anywhere in England. Now set out in the fields on fire for the love of God, John attracted thousands of people. And when he attracted these people, he had to do something with them, and there were always a small group that were really more staunchly converted than others. And these 10 to 12 people in every location, he would turn into a Methodist society. He would teach them how to do Bible studies, just like Susanna had done in the kitchen. They would be taught how to lead a Bible study and how to organize themselves, how to begin to do good works. And these Methodist societies grew. Within a few years, Wesley had many preaching stations and began to convert others who also went out and preached the word. Most of these were lay people. They weren't ordained, they weren't highly educated people, but they were people that were set on fire by Wesley's teaching. As I said, he was contemporary with Benjamin Franklin, and what happened in the American colonies was that we had this little revolution, declared ourselves independent from England, and yet the church was still the Anglican Church. It was still tied to the Church of England, and of course the king was still the head of that church. Americans didn't really like that, and many Americans had adopted the Methodist societies as being their preferred church, but there was no church because Wesley wouldn't allow it to form. So in 1784, he finally relented and allowed that they could start Methodist societies in America, and they could form their own church. This was a highly controversial thing, but John felt that the Americans were ready for it. And so 2 men were ordained as bishops of the early American church in 1784 at a conference called the Christmas Conference. It took place in Baltimore at Lively Lane Chapel. And that was the formation of the Methodist Episcopal Church in America. From there, the Methodists began to send out circuit riders and convert the country. That first conference was really remarkable also, and for what it did, besides just forming its formative stages, they decided to form a book-making, book-selling venture. That's the Abingdon and Cokesbury arm of the Methodist Church today. At one point, the largest magazines in the country were Methodist magazines, and for many years, one of the largest booksellers in the country was the Methodist bookstores. Also, they decided to form a college. Unfortunately, the college burned a couple times, but the United Methodist Church went on to form colleges all over the country, and probably outside of government and the Catholic Church, you'll find that the Methodist Church has started more colleges and universities than any other. And though these colleges and universities have moved astray from the Methodist fold over the years, many of them still recognize their Methodist roots. Schools that you may have heard of, like USC, Northwestern, Duke University, Boston College, or Boston University, were all started by the Methodist Church. So you can take note that the early stages of Methodist education in John Wesley were taking root in the early stages of Methodism in this country. The Methodist circuit riders went out all across the country, and every time they would come across a town, they would begin to preach in that place. And so the early stages of the westward movement in the United States was early stages for the Methodist movement as well. And just about every small town has a Methodist church, probably founded very near the time that that church or that town was founded. The German Methodist Church was called the Evangelical United Brethren, and in 1968 the English branch and the German branch in America reunited, and we got the name that we carry today, the United Methodist Church. And that's a little bit about the history of how we came to be in the United States.